We were married for 18 years, had 3 darling children, when I learned that he had been having multiple affairs over years.
My name is Jenny, and I'm a wife and mom raising 2 kids. But I used to live a more glamorous life as a TV reporter. I was on the nightly news interviewing pop stars and politicians. So when I said goodbye to TV and hello to motherhood, I suddenly discovered what we moms are up against. We live in a world that tells us to be rich and famous, thin and successful. You know, almost nobody says, "Oh, hey, you're a mom? That is fabulous." But you are fabulous, and I'm here to tell you why.
It's the ChannelMom Show with Jenny Dean Schmidt. We're here for you.
Brought to you by the Healthy Marriage Project. Just click on one of their ads to find out about a healthy relationship workshop near you.
Need you to steal my show. Can't wait to watch you go.
Okay.
So take it away.
Welcome back to the ChannelMom Show, where we are here for you, Mom. I played that song for a reason, or actually Daniel played the song for a reason. Anybody who knows it knows what it means, and that is my hope today, that God would steal my shows. If you've ever done something wrong, this interview is really going to help you. I hope it's not disrespectful to say that my favorite thing about our next guest is her mistakes, mostly because she's willing to share them with humility. She's the daughter of a very famous man with worldwide fame. Ruth Graham is the 3rd child of evangelist Billy Graham's 5 children, and she's here to talk about her own unbelievable struggles and to help you with yours. Ruth has dealt with a daughter's teen pregnancies, another's bulimia, a son's drug use. She's also struggled with suicidal thoughts after learning that her first husband had been unfaithful, and also a number of additional unsuccessful marriages after that. She's also the author of a life-changing book called In Every Pew Sits a Broken Heart, Hope for the Hurting. I couldn't put it down last night as I was reading it. We're blessed to have Ruth Graham on the ChannelMom Show. Welcome, Ruth.
Thank you, Jenny. It's so nice to be with you.
Oh, thank you. We're going to have a nice little conversation for the next 40 minutes, and I know you and I are both hopeful that people are going to be helped by it.
Oh, absolutely. That's the only reason I do this kind of thing.
Okay. Hey, do people make too much of introducing you as the daughter of Billy Graham, or is that okay in your mind?
Well, it's okay because I know my father is very loved around the world, and I'm very proud to be his daughter. And as long as they can look past that and see that I'm a real person and live a real life. I mean, I don't live in some bubble somewhere. But I am very proud of my father, and I wrote of him some years ago that I'm much more warmed by the embers than I ever was by the fire. My father, in his old age, he's always been loving and gracious, but even more so now. And my mother died about 6 years ago, and we thought, oh, dear, how long will Daddy live after that, because they were so close. Mm-hmm. But it's been wonderful in the sense that Daddy did go through a little bit of a depression, but he snapped out of it. And when she was alive, we would go home to see her. Yeah. And and if he was home, that was fine. But now we go home to see him and spend time with him. And I think he's had a chance to get to know us children much better than before, because he was always so busy. And Mother was always sort of the center of attention because she was ill. Yeah. So this has been a blessing from the Lord. And I don't know how much longer we have with Daddy, but we'll take every minute we can.
Yeah, yeah. I want to get right into your story so that people can be helped. You have a couple of things going on I want people to understand about you. You really are into authenticity. You are concerned about the quote-unquote plastic Christians and how people don't feel like they can be real in front of Christians, and Christians don't feel like they can be real in front of those who are not Christians. I'm going to read a little excerpt from your book. Is that okay?
Sure.
Here's what you write on page 12 of your book. I know what it's like to sit in the pew with a broken heart. For years, I sat in church with my fears, doubts, and disappointments, thinking I was alone in my condition. Those around me seemed to have it all together. They looked so spiritual. Did they not struggle as I did? Was I the only one whose dreams had fallen to pieces? Was I the only one who had blown it? Was I the only one depressed and feeling beyond hope? To protect myself and fit in, I masked my shortcomings and dared not to whisper my failures. Incredibly honest book. I mean, I'll tell you what, you were talking about feeling sick to your stomach at a portion of your life when things were not going well. I felt sick to my stomach as I was commiserating with you and feeling your pain. And you're brutally honest, Ruth, and I applaud you for that, because people need to see you hurting, and somebody who's been in the public eye. Your daddy, Billy Graham, has been in the public eye for most of his life. yet you're real and you're open and honest. And also, you know that there's this dynamic out there. A lot of people resent Christians because they think that they all think they're holier than thou and they have no problems. And so they can't even get to know God because they can't get to know the real Christian. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think that it's very important for us to be able to share our story, not somebody else's story, but our story. And when we do that, we give permission to other people to tell their story. And years ago, I was getting ready to sit down in my church service, and I greeted a friend who was sitting behind me, and she said, well, Ruth, how are you? And I said, oh, I'm fine. And the service started, and I thought, I just lied to her. I'm not fine. And so after the service, I went up to her, and I said, Helene, I am not fine. I did lie to you, and I want to say I'm sorry. And I said, I'm just having a real struggle here. And she said, oh, I'm so glad you said that because I'm struggling this morning, too. She said, can we pray together? And see, if I hadn't said anything, we'd have just both gone through the day hurting.
Yeah.
But when you open yourself up, yes, it's fearsome. Yes, it can be frightening. You make yourself vulnerable. And there are people who will take swats at you. But God has called me to be transparent, to be honest, and make myself vulnerable. And I believe it helps people. And I'm very grateful that God has used my mess, and I have had plenty of messes in my life, but He's using them for His glory. And I just am very grateful and humbled that He would still choose to use me.
Yeah. I think sometimes He uses us more in our mistakes than in our victories. I want you to at least delve into the first part of your story so people can understand just how real you are and how much you're willing to share about what the trail or the trials you've been through with your marital life.
Well, I married when I was 18. I married a man who was a friend of my family's, and almost from the get-go, he was controlling and abusive. But I just thought, well, that's just what I'm stuck with. I will make the best of it. And we were married for 18 years, had 3 darling children, when I learned that he had been having multiple affairs over years. And I had just never expected that, never anticipated it, never thought about it, never crossed my mind. I grew up around honorable men, and that this man was not honorable just blew me away. But I thought, I'm just going to cover it up. We will just go forward. We'll just keep on going. And during a year and a half while I remained silent, depression set in. And it was very, very difficult. Finally, one Sunday morning, I had had enough. It was a good sermon, but I'd had enough, and I went home looking for razor blades. Yeah. And as I've said before, my husband didn't use a razor, razor blades, so he used an electric razor, so there weren't any, but it was a wake-up call for me to realize that I needed help, and I needed to take care of my children. I had 3 children depending on me, and I did get help. And one of the first things this person told me was, Ruth, you're not crazy, because I was trying to make the abnormal fit into a normal picture, and it wasn't fitting, and I was absolutely coming unglued. So I did get help, and I'm very grateful for that. But during that time when our marriage was falling apart, it did end in divorce. We tried for about 3 years, but it ended in divorce. I had a daughter who, the family was falling apart. There wasn't anything she could control but her eating, and so she became, she had an eating disorder. And you don't confront an eating disorder. You have to pray and trust that they will get help. Because it's a secretive disorder. Yeah. My son was off to technical school, and on the way out there, he called me and said, Mom, I'm sick. And I said, well, what's the wrong? I go to the hospital. He said, Mom, I'm on drugs. I can't go any farther. He was hundreds of miles away from me. I couldn't do anything. I could only pray. Yeah. But we were able to get him into a teen rehab, and that was great, and it really helped him. And my youngest daughter sat beside me on my bed and said, Mom, I think I'm pregnant. And I never anticipated this. Never anticipated this in a million years. But God was faithful. And the years with my daughter, she had that baby. She released that baby for adoption, which was terribly courageous and wonderful, a gift to another family. But her heart was empty, her womb was empty, and her arms were empty. And so 16 months later, she gave birth to another baby out of wedlock, a little boy that she chose to raise on her own. And I just never thought that any of this would happen. No. I mean, I was Billy Graham's family, right? Yeah. But through it all, and I don't want to sound Pollyannish, but God was with me, and I struggled, and I became angry, and at one point I said, God, I am finished with you. I'm tired. I've tried to do it your way, and it's not working. But even in that, God did not reject me. God still held me. God still had a plan for me, and He saw me through it, and I am so grateful for His faithfulness. My mother, the week of her death, she was memorizing Psalm 90. You have been our dwelling place throughout the generations, and that is true. God is our dwelling place, and what happened for my parents, how he was with my parents, he is for me, he is for my children, he's going to be for my grandchildren. And so I'm very grateful. And
do you mind if I interject?
Sure.
In reading your book, there are a couple of things. And by the way, we are talking to Ruth Graham, the daughter of Ruth and Billy Graham, and also the author of In Every Pew Sits a Broken Heart, Hope for the Hurting, and also another book, which we can talk about in the next segment. I was just amazed, Ruth, by your expressions of pain and how honest you were actually coming from Billy Graham's family about your struggles with God. Because I'll tell you what, there are people today listening that just don't give God a chance because they think, why does he let the kinds of things that happen to you happen to people, period? They don't get why we have to have Jesus and not 6 other options of God. And so they turn away, they don't follow Christianity, or they don't follow God at all. And you were sitting in this book and saying, here's my pain. It was awful. I could barely stand to breathe. I could barely stand to walk. I was exhausted. I didn't want to get out of bed. I was suicidal. I didn't understand how this could be happening. My children were falling apart. My marriages were falling apart. I didn't know where to turn. I didn't even know if God was there or if he was good. I was so appreciative of you taking us through the valley that you went through, and yet showing that in the end, God can come through people in those situations, and he really was there for you. But I appreciated the darkness before the light. Do you understand?
I think that's important to share. I mean, you have to be able to share it appropriately. And like I said, I can tell my story. I can't tell everybody else's story. But we do go through those dark times. And if we'll read our scriptures, we know that David went through terribly dark times. And when I was struggling, so I set up camp in Job. He expressed exactly how I felt, you know. So it's not out of the ordinary that we struggle with God. You're not abnormal if you do. It's abnormal if you don't. I mean, let's have an honest relationship with God, because you think of your earthly relationships, you struggle with them. You may get into an argument with your husband. You may get in a fight with your husband. You may tell him he's wrong. He may tell you you're wrong. But you have an honest debate, and we can do the same with God. I mean, Jeremiah got mad at God, for pity's sake. Mm-hmm. You know, David did. David was a man after God's own heart, but he told God many times what he thought. And it's okay. God's not threatened by that. He's bigger than our anger. He's bigger than our question.
Or our doubt. All the people out there that doubt that God is even real,
Absolutely.
He's bigger than that. Yeah. Yeah, and there are a ton that do. If people want to get a hold of you, you're doing all kinds of things. You're giving speeches. You're part of a leadership conference right now. You were just part of a grace conference at my church, the Journey Church in Conifer, who did an incredible Grace Initiative conference. How can people find you, get a hold of you, get a hold of this book, In Every Pew Sits a Broken Heart, Hope for the Hurting? Tell us your website information.
Well, you can go to ruthgrahamandfriends.com. And actually, if you just type my name in, Ruth Graham, it'll come up. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to get a hold of me, and there's contact information. There's my schedule on there, so I'm easily found.
Okay, so your low points are what you use to help other people reach the higher points, and I so appreciate that about Ruth Graham, daughter of Billy Graham, author of 9 books. We're so happy to have her here with us on the Channel Mom Show. Stay tuned for more of Ruth Graham. She's going to share with you how she's helping others and how she can help you right here on the Channel Mom Show. Coming back.
Say what you need to say.